Hello and welcome. Today I would like to show you a few ugly little bugs. My name is Andy and you are watching Mod.Top. The bugs I'm talking about are Beaverette Mk.III, or also called Beaverbug Mk.I. I've long wanted to build some of the improvised vehicles the British built after Dunkirk and the fear of a German invasion. Unfortunately, there are no models for this in injection molding in 1:72 scale. But 3D printing can help here. The files for the models shown here come from Fylde Armouries and can be found on wargaming3d.com. The models are original in 1:56 scale and I printed them reduced to 1:72. However, I changed a few things beforehand. During my research on the Beaverettes, I discovered that the Mk.III vehicles were not only built with different turrets, but also that each of these turret variants has different vehicle armor details. And of course, I wanted to recreate these details as much as possible using the original photos. The 3D printing and the programs with which such files are relatively easy to edit also made it possible for me to recreate the prototype of the Beaverette Mk.III. This differs from the production models primarily due to the different weld seams on the armor. And who has such an exotic prototype in their collection? After printing, washing and curing the models came the part that I like least. First the removal of the support structures and then some sanding work. In a few places I had overdone it with the supports, so I also used a little bit of filler. I simply closed the necessary drainage holes on the bottom of the models with a thin layer of paper, which I hardened with superglue. Since there is no safety system between hull and turret, and the latter can easily fall down, I drilled holes in the hulls and on the underside of the turrets and glued round magnets there. These are strong enough to hold the turrets on the models, even if you turn it upside down. And of course, the turrets can also be rotated with the magnets. After everything was ready, I prepared the models for painting. To remove fingerprints and sanding dust, the vehicles were degreased and cleaned with a little isopropanol. A black primer from AK was then used. This dries beautifully matte, increases the color adhesion to the resin, and can also be used as a base color for the underside of the vehicle. I then painted the base color of the first vehicle. It is a standard version with a brain turret and is intended to be presented in the colors of the Irish Army. In 1942 or 3, the Irish took over some Beaverette Mk.IIIs and Mk.IVs from the British and painted them in a light grey navy color. This is the color I'm trying to portray now. After some research, I decided on French artillery grey from AK. I then mixed the color with some ivory and carefully sprayed this lighter shade into the middle of all larger areas to get some color modulation. This means the surfaces don't look so boring. For the other two vehicles, I used khaki green No. 3 from Vallejo as a base color. I would have liked to paint one of the vehicles in SCC2 brown for variety, but this color had not yet been introduced into the British Army when the Beaverettes Mk.III were manufactured. After the base color was dry, I also lightened the larger areas of these two vehicles and gave them some color modulation. This time I used some highlight flash to mix it. Then comes the turn of the camouflage paintwork. I started with the prototype vehicle. This has a very dark camouflage stripes in the photo I know, and I've studied a lot of British photos from the time, and I'm pretty sure the dark streaks must be in dark tarmac. I decided to simply apply the camouflage paint with a brush. I find this is much easier on such small vehicles than masking and painting with an airbrush. The color I used was German Grey from Vallejo. Of course, I copied the camouflage pattern from the original vehicle as much as possible, but I improvised on the left side of the vehicle and the back. The British production vehicle, on the other hand, was clearly camouflaged in a lighter color. At that time, it could only have been dark green number 4. For this, I used German Camo Extra Dark Green from Vallejo. And this camouflage pattern would also have been quite difficult to mask, so I used the brush again. And as before, I tried to stick to the pattern from the photo as best as possible and improvise the areas that weren't visible. One thing to note was that the turret in the photo was turned backwards to around 5 o'clock. On this vehicle, I then lightened the dark green areas of the camouflage slightly with the airbrush. To do this, I mixed the base color again with some highlight flash from Vallejo. The tires of all vehicles then had to be painted. For this, I simply used a matte black. I know there are all sorts of special rubber or tire colors nowadays, but I almost only use real black tires, since I usually treat the chassis and tires with a little dust anyway, and the dark black then turns into a matte, dirty rubber gray tone anyway. I painted the machine guns of the 2 production vehicles with black gray. Afterwards, all 3 vehicles received a light dry brushing with Africa Core highlight. Just strong enough to brighten the edges of the dark vehicles a little bit and to give the Irish grey a slight sandy tone here and there. This completed the basic painting for me, and the vehicles received a coat of glossy varnish. I then did a pin wash with mixed dark brown for green vehicles. All rivets and recesses were given a little enamel wash. The glossy varnish helps a lot to ensure that the wash flows better. After the wash had dried, I blended it in the areas where there was too much, or I removed it completely. This works quite well with a cotton swab and slightly rotating movements. Where you can't reach with a cotton swab, a brush dipped in white spirit helps to dissolve and blend the wash. Next came the decals. Of course, I had to make many of the badges myself. To do this, I created the respective graphics in MS Paint based on the photos of the original vehicles, and then I printed them out on copy paper. Then I cut out these paper badges and placed them on the models to check whether the size fits and whether it looks anything like what I imagine. If everything fits, the badges are printed out on white decal paper and cut out. Since I print with a laser printer, the badges can then be used like normal water slide decals. If you print this with an inkjet printer, the ink must of course first be fixed to the paper with a clear varnish. Otherwise, the ink will come off again if you soak the decal in water. My Irish vehicle got a pair of number plates and 2 badges on the right and left below the headlights with the inscription YD. Unfortunately, I couldn't figure out exactly what these letters mean. I assume these are the tactical signs of some headquarter unit, but if any of you are familiar with the Irish Army and can help me here, please let me know in the comments. Oh yes, as usual, I apply the decals with a layer of microset and then treat them with some microsoil. In the photo, the Beaverette prototype only has the inscription Beaverette Mk.III on the side. I also created this decal myself. Unfortunately, since I can't print in white, I cheated a bit and printed the lettering on a black background. The entire lettering is less than 1 mm high, but you can actually read the lettering on the model. That's really fascinating. For the British production vehicle, I only printed out one badge myself, the bridge rating plate. Since the 5 in the photo was not placed in the middle, but is rather far down, I of course wanted it to be that way on my model. I made the War Department census number out of individual numbers from an existing US decal sheet. The only drawback was that the numbers 4 on the decal sheet are open at the top, but closed in the photo. So I will have to correct the decals by brush with a bit of white paint. What I noticed while researching is that all photos with Beaverette Mk.III with brain turrets show census numbers with M, while all vehicles with Vickers machine gun turrets show Royal Air Force RAF registrations. This is done incorrectly on the vast majority of build models you find on the internet. After the decals were treated with microsole and dried, I touched up a few areas with a brush and some paint. Then it was time to get dirty. Of course, these vehicles couldn't drive through mud and dirt, but they were certainly capable of handling unpaved roads and dry meadows, and so I wanted to depict a bit of dust and dirt on them. And of course, also to make the models look a little bit more interesting. First, I coated the undersides with some darker dirt. The same color was also used for the tires. The tread of the tires was then highlighted with a dust color, and as always, I use various dust and dirt deposits from AK for this work. These are enamel washes and offer the advantage that, on the one hand, you can dilute the applied paint very heavily with white spirit, for example to create thin layers of dust, and on the other hand, you can also remove the paint afterwards from areas where you don't like it. I blend in the dirt on the wheels with a dry cotton swab. This results in beautiful dusty rubber tires and nothing remains of the original pure black. To make the models a little more lively, they get a few small splashes all around and a kind of veil of dust near the ground. After I was happy with it, the weathering was completed. The models then received 2 thin coats of matte varnish to seal all the effects. And ta-da! My 3 little Beaverettes Mk.III are finished. It turned out to be a nice colorful bunch, and I had a lot of fun painting these really small models. I have to mention that the final photos were lit a little too well. This means the colors appear brighter than they actually are. The British vehicle in G3, G4 green in particular looks a bit strange in the light. The real colors came out a little better in the video recordings. I hope you like my 3 little bugs as much as I do. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe. And feel free to write your questions, wishes and suggestions in the comments below. I would also be happy if someone could help me with what the Irish badges YD on my vehicles mean. Otherwise, thank you for watching, have a nice day and see you next time.